Hello, and welcome to Everybody Eats, a Washington Wizards podcast on the Blue Wire Network. My name is Varun Shankar. I'm the Wizards reporter for the Washington Post, and on this week's show, it was Player Previews Part 1. The Athletics' Josh Robbins joined me, and we dove into Bilal Coulibaly, AJ Johnson, Tristan, Vukcevic, and Will Riley. For each player, we looked at what intrigued us, what concerned us, what could swing their season, and what would be a successful year for each. We also gave one thing we were each interested in for Sunday's preseason opener. I can't believe it, but the season's basically here. Before we get to that, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, leave a comment. On Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. Can't tell you how helpful it is for the show. Really appreciate it if you're able to do so. It was a really fun conversation with Josh. Let's get to it right now. Joining me on the show today is the senior NBA writer for The Athletic, covering the Wizards, Magic, and NBA, Josh Robbins. Josh, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me. This is show number 2, correct?
This is episode 2, yeah.
All right. So, and is it right that the podcast name is Everybody Eats?
That's correct.
Okay. So, if the title is Everybody Eats, how do you expect all the listeners to continue to listen if we're eating food throughout the podcast?
I hadn't thought about that, but, there's these fun buttons to mute things on the mic, so hopefully we can get through without too much crunching.
Okay, that's all right. I had lunch anyway, so
go.
All good.
So did I.
And yes, I do know what Everybody Eats means, so.
Covering the team at that time? Or was that right before?
No, but that whole phrase has been used for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, so today we are going to be taking a look at some of the Wizards' young players, doing some player previews before the season begins. Let's start with Bilal Coulibaly, who had a turbulent second season, ended again with injury. There was a moment in the season where the offense looked like it was going to come around, and I think that's something you want to talk about. So what interests you about Bilal Coulibaly?
Well, there are a lot of things that interest me about Bilal, like many of their players. They have a bunch of interesting players. But in Bilal's case in particular, I would like to see if he can put his stamp on games offensively in a large number of games. And I'm not suggesting that he needs to be dominant or that he needs to be perfect possession by possession, but how much of the Wizards' offense does he put his stamp on? Can he be impactful on that end? And then do that, not necessarily every game, but say 2 out of every 3 games. I think that would be big progress, and I think that would be a very positive step now that he's 21 years old. He's still very young. We shouldn't expect him to be perfect. We shouldn't expect him to be a permanent force on the offensive end, but you'd like to see some progression there, and I think that's a valid way to describe the kind of progression that they would like to see, and I think I'll be looking for.
What does that progression look like to you? Is it a more consistent scoring ability? Is it more consistent? Where do you want to see the offensive game grow?
I would like to see it in all facets. So last year, I do think his biggest growth area, where he made the most growth, was putting the ball on the court and initiating the offense. I'd like to see him continue to do that. I'd like to see him up his consistency with the 3 ball. I'd like to see him get to the hoop more often. Now, he did do that, I think, reasonably well last year in the half court. So I'm talking about his all-around game, not just his scoring, not just his passing, not just his playmaking, but a step or 2 steps forward in all 3 of those phases.
Yeah, because there's a lot to like with Bilal's game. He's a very explosive athlete that comes both in a vertical sense, but also in a side-to-side explosiveness. He draws fouls really well. He has a great first step. He also showed, like you talked about with the playmaking, a pretty good ability to read the game. I was going back to a Spurs game from, I think, February of last year, and he ran a pick and roll with Tristan Vukcevic, who we're also going to talk about later. And the Spurs switch it, so Vuc slips it, and there's an opening where Bilal could have thrown the pass. He doesn't throw the pass, and the possession goes into something else. Less than a minute later, the same thing happens, and this time Bilal does throw the pass. It's perfectly placed, leads him to the hoop. Vukcevic gets fouled. It's a great play, and I think this is a guy who has played with the ball in his hands at lower levels, and you saw him start to do that more last year. The usage rate ticked up, and there is a lot of stuff to like. It just didn't come in any kind of consistent form or fashion, especially in the second half of the season. And a lot of that, like you talk, a lot of that's down to the shooting, right? I mean, he shot 28.1% from three, and that gets us to the next question. What concerns you most about this player, the three-pointer?
Well, I would just add to what you said is a lot of it's dependent on who you play alongside. Mm-hmm. And if you're playing alongside someone who needs to have the ball in his hands or did have the ball in his hands, in this case, primarily last season, Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma, you're not going to have many opportunities to get into a playmaking rhythm, and you're not going to have anywhere near as many opportunities to get into that rhythm. So that plays a significant role in all of this. So it's never all just the player. It's yes, it is the player. But he's also one of five, and as you know, basketball, the guys are more interconnected. The players are more interconnected, interdependent on each other than almost any other sport. So that's key. Now, what's the big concern with him? I think the three-point shooting is critical. That's true. Because if he can get that rolling where the defense has to worry about him, then he can diversify his drive game. It means he can put the ball on the court. He can fake, he can put the ball on the court, attack the rim, which, as you noted, is something that he's good at already. And then if he's attacking the rim, he could spray the ball out to shooters. And but you have to start somewhere. I think it's fair to say he has made that start in terms of being able to put the ball on the floor and attack the basket. But it sure would help if he were to be more of a shooting threat.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that stands out, and this is because teams aren't guarding him, 97% of the three-pointers that Bilal took last year were with defenders at least 4 or more feet away. And he didn't shoot well on those either. He 28% from three, it's not tenable for a wing in the league now. So I like that he stayed confident enough to keep taking those threes late in the season. But, downstream effects, there's nobody closing out on him. There's no advantages that he can create. When he takes pick and rolls, they are sagging off him, and he's got to keep taking them and get better at them. And we'll see if he's able to make some strides this season in that area. But, I mean, there again, same Spurs game in mid-February. Jordan Poole drove inside, and Bilal drifts to the corner. He's wide open. His man, Harrison Barnes, is at the free throw line contesting Jordan's layup attempt. No interest at all in defending Bilal. Bilal's wide open. Poole keeps going for the layup, misses it, and the possession goes there. But that's the kind of shot where you would like to see him get the ball and also make the shot.
Certainly that play that you described, they sagged off him, but he's not a horrendous three-point shooter. I think that makes it sound as though you don't need to guard him. I think you do need to guard him, but you shouldn't be doing any hard closeouts on him. So yes, those are the shots that he needs to make, but they're also a bunch of guys, 13 out of every 15 players on every roster should be able to hit that shot.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a horrendous shooter in that, he's willing to take the shot. They're not closing out on him really hard. I mean, they're putting centers on him a lot of games. He's a spacing non-threat. Again, sub 30% from three on a lot of open attempts. He's not getting defended like someone who NBA teams are worried at all. I mean, defenses are very happy when Bilal Coulibaly takes a three-pointer right now, and that needs to change.
If it's a choice between Jordan Poole attacking the rim or other guys getting the ball near the rim and Bilal shooting a high quadrant three, yes, then I agree with you on that.
Okay. What are the swing points you see for Bilal's 2025-26 season?
Such as?
What are the things that you think that can turn his season from a real great season to maybe not so great a season? What are some of the things that you could see going one way or the other?
Well, health. Health. Yeah. This is someone who has had his two NBA seasons cut short because of injury. One, the wrist fracture as a rookie. The second a hamstring injury last year, and they probably could have rushed him back if they were playing meaningful games and they needed him. Yes, he could have played at the end, but you don't. Again, young players need to play for the most part, with some exceptions, but they also need to play. You need sheer volume. And for the type of play and improvements that we're talking about relative to Bilal and skill growth, you need to really rack up the minutes and get into a rhythm. I think that's something that's often lost in NBA coverage, that you need to settle into a groove of some kind. So, A, health. B, and I think they're going to have this more than any time of his career, I think it's going to have to be a ball-sharing offense, which is what they want. That played into the Jordan Poole trade. I don't think it was the primary reason, but it played into it. And in an offense that is more democratic, small D, I think that can help him and can and should help others.
Yeah, for me, comes back down to the three ball a little bit. I remember something that Will Dawkins said, I think in his end of season press conference, where he talked about how you can get guys from being bad shooters to good shooters. You probably can't go from bad to great. Can Bilal get to good or even a little bit lower than that? Can he get to a threat from the perimeter, even if he's not a 5-alarm fire for a defense? The low to mid 30s, I think, would be a really encouraging sign. If you can get higher than that, you're throwing a party. Defensively, I think he's been a good defender his first few years. He takes on tough matchups. He's got the athleticism, the length to match up with them. I would like to see him be a little bit more disruptive. He's been good there, don't get me wrong. Per cleaning the glass, 70th percentile among wings and steals, 77th percentile in offensive rebounding, 42nd percentile in defensive rebounding. I'd like to see that defensive rebounding number tick up a little bit more, especially because of his grab-and-go ability in transition. And I'd like to see the steals become something where he is someone that you don't feel comfortable dribbling around at all and getting more and more aggressive in that area. Josh, what is a successful season for Bilal Coulibaly?
Well, I think it's everything that we've discussed. I think it's a successful season for him is to play as close to a full season as possible, to make significant gains on the offensive end. And again, by significant gains, I'm not saying average 20 points. I'm not saying shoot 40% from three, but tick up in those areas. I think we all need to remember he's only 21. This is only his third full season playing senior level basketball. He was always considered a relatively raw prospect, and now it's and I don't even think it's ever been the feel for the game. It's really just the raw skill.
Yep. With
Bilal. And that is something that can be built. And yes, sometimes bad shooters do become great shooters. Jason Kidd, of course, being the primary example. And he's so young, like so many of the Wizards players are, that time is on their side. Maybe not relative to the first the first non-rookie scale contract, but in terms of the total amount of time in a career, it's still very much on his side.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the contract, what would you have to see from him this season if you're the Wizards to give him an extension?
Well, I don't think there's any question that he will get an extension unless something occurs that we have that is very difficult to believe. He's never going to really crater as a player because his defense should always be there. I think that it's very difficult for me to envision any scenario in which he's not at some point getting a second contract with the Wizards. Now, does it necessarily have to be a rookie scale extension that occurs before Halloween of 2026? Not necessarily, and we have no idea what the negotiation points will be. But and you asked about a rookie scale extension, not whether he will remain with the Wizards beyond year 4. But I find it very difficult to believe, absent a trade, that he doesn't have a second contract with Washington.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Whether it happens after this season or whether it happens with him going to the RFA market and then bringing him back, they have the control in the situation the Wizards do, and I think that they want to keep Bilal around. Let's talk now about A.J. Johnson, who the Wizards acquired last season as part of the Kyle Kuzma trade. Young guard, pretty explosive guard, did some interesting things last year, but I think still remains a very unfinished product. Josh Robbins, what interests you about A.J. Johnson?
I'd like to see him handle the ball as a point guard. I'd like to see how he fares in that. Now he's a combo guard, a combo guard who's probably more comfortable at this stage being a two guard. But they have the luxury to experiment. They have the luxury, almost the necessity to try him also at the one. And for him being. He will turn 21 in December. After a year where he didn't really play a whole lot, and even after a year prior to that in Australia where there were times where he didn't play a whole lot, he as much as almost any young player on their roster, has to play. And I suspect that he will play at least some of the time with the go-go. There's no shame in that. We're talking like a 30-minute a night type of amount of playing time, which is something he can handle. He can handle that physically, and that's something that he needs. That's what I expect from him, and I will be curious to see how he develops. But if I were to just select one area, then it would be playing a little bit as a point guard.
What does the difference look like to you between playing as kind of that combo guard, especially in a league where, I mean, at least to me, it feels like the gap between ones and twos has been shrunk more and more. But what do you think that difference looks like even now?
I think the difference is, can you organize your team in the half court? Can you organize your team in the half court? Can you start the offense? But you're right. The lines are blurred, particularly when you see people who came up as pure point guards like Drew Holiday, Derek White, essentially being twos and threes for a good portion of the time when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown would essentially initiate the offense and play make. There aren't many conventional point guards anymore. You can almost count them on one, maybe two hands. You're thinking of people like Chris Paul. You're thinking of Tyus Jones. I guess Ja Morant could possibly be put into that category, although he's so explosive, he could be a two as well. I mean, bring the ball up court, get you into that offense, keep the team organized.
I think that he is someone who can provide a lot of rim pressure for this offense. He's someone who has clear explosiveness, clear handle. He's a walking paint touch, which is something I think this team needs. I agree with you that I don't think he will find as many minutes as he might want with the Wizards, especially in the early part of the season, but going down to the go-go will help at points. There's a lot for him to work on, in part because he's a very skinny player, and that continues. He has gained some muscle, but you still see it, and that brings us to the next thing, which is what concerns you about this player. Right now, his defense is a dramatic work in progress, like it is for a lot of young players, but I think for him, some of the struggles are a little bit more pronounced. He's just not very strong at points, and you could see that show up when he's guarding one-on-one. The Nets game in Summer League, the screen navigation for him was a adventure every single time. Ben Saroff was able to bump him a few times. You could see some of the strength differential show up there. And he's also very reactive to a ball handler. You could see him move a lot when the ball handler has only moved a little, and that could sometimes get him out of position.
I think some of these issues, such as being maybe overreactive, again, you got to play.
Yep.
And here's someone who, for large portions of 2 full pro seasons, hasn't played steadily. He did at the end with the Wizards, that's true, but very tough to make gains, or at least the gains that we're talking about when you're sitting. Decisions that you make within the flow of the game. That's something that can't be learned entirely on film. It can't be learned 3-on-3 in these stay ready games. And for someone like A.J. Johnson, someone for whom the Wizards kind of sort of consider this his rookie NBA season, the G League really is your friend.
Yeah, definitely. What have you thought about his decision making when he gets inside the paint?
I think that we have not seen him get enough reps to really know. He hasn't had probably enough reps to know how he can finish over a taller player, how often he can do it, how he gets to the line. Again,
he has done that very well so far, for whatever that's worth.
Right, but you need to know whether you can do it when a tight game that matters is on the line. And he just does not have the reps yet really to really know. These are skills that take a while to learn and only through doing. And so that I'm quite certain is the Wizards' priority for him. And he's playing at a position, if we're talking about playing off ball, well, that's very crowded. Playing on the ball, well, that's pretty crowded. Not quite as crowded, but pretty crowded. Probably Bub and CJ McCollum are going to get those minutes, I would think. So he's going to have to be a little bit patient probably to begin the season.
Yeah. What are the swing points for his 2025-26 season?
Because he is so explosive, just like with Bilal, and because his handle is probably better than Bilal's, I think that's quite easy to say right now. If he can get a reliable three-point shot that just gets to league average, well, then he becomes extraordinarily dangerous. And I think you brought up earlier, the decisions that he makes in the paint. Well, that's something that can be learned and built with time. But you sure would love to have that ability to do it, to give yourself those decisions. And as you said with Bilal, and I think it's very true, if you can become a three-point threat, it opens up other elements of your game. And then you can really start to work on things.
For me, it's a mix of some of the things you talked about, the efficiency inside, the efficiency from three. And then for me, it's also, do some of the strength improvements it seems like he might have made show up at all in his game? He said he added 9 pounds of muscle at media day. Does that show up at all? Either on offense or on defense? Is he able to absorb some of these bumps a little bit better than he was last season, or dish them out? And the other thing is kind of getting to the idea of playing as a one, do a better job of understanding some of the point guard basics. I think Bub does a really good job with this, of always understanding time and score and always playing with that kind of internal clock in his head. AJ, at times, it feels like he's just playing at one speed too often. If he can change it up a little bit more and also be better at slowing things down when the game calls for it. I think there was one example in a Kings game late in the season where he goes for a fast break layup with the Wizards up 5 with 1 minute left. Time and score. Calm it down. Bleed the clock there a little bit and, get a good shot at the end of it. So those are the kinds of things I want to see from him. What is a successful season for AJ Johnson?
All the things we talked about, getting lots of minutes in lots of games where you're happy to play, even if it's in the G League, because that's not where he's going to end up in his future. Make the most of that. Come back to the Wizards a better player, or take advantage of your minutes with the Wizards if they somehow happen early in the season. But he's someone who needs to play. And I guess that I'm saying that a lot for both guys who we've discussed, but it's true.
It's so true.
It's certainly true. And it's a luxury that the Wizards have, correct? Where they don't need to be worrying about trying to win every game for any single reason, whether it's to get into the play-in or to secure the 6th seed before the end of the regular season. And it's actually to their benefit for millions of reasons to devote the vast majority of minutes to the first, second year players. And yes, correct the mistakes, hold players accountable and expect them to improve. But hey, if you make a mistake, you also that loses a game. Okay, well, you lose a game and you have a better shot to pick higher in the 2026 draft, which, as you know, is critical for a rebuilding team.
Absolutely. For me is, even if you see time in the G League, if at the end of the season you can establish yourself as someone who walks into next season as one of the three top guards on the team, if it's him, Trey, and Bub as the three guards entering next season, I think that's a successful season. Obviously, the draft can complicate things, but generally speaking, if you've secured that kind of spot by then.
That would be a hugely successful
Exactly.
season for him, in my opinion. Hugely. I mean, just couldn't be more successful, I think, if he were to come in. Are you saying top three guard among both guard positions?
I guess I am grouping them together. Yeah, if after Trey and Bub, assuming there's no major additions, I mean, if they add Darren Peterson, this is a different discussion. But
Sure.
Out of the guys who are on the roster right now, if by the end of the season you can look at it and say, okay, Bub and Trey are the top two guys because of how much we've invested in them and how they've played on the court. But AJ Johnson, he showed enough, especially in the later parts of the season, after maybe when CJ McCollum was playing a little bit less or not on the team. That's when you could say, okay, AJ's that next guy after those two.
Well, that would be a fantastic year for AJ Johnson, someone who's going to turn 21 in December and played lightly during his rookie year. But if that could come true, that's a heck of a story. That's a heck of a, and by story, I don't mean like a story that you and I would write. I mean a heck of a story for the Wizards. And
it's also because, question, I mean, there's not that much competition for him at these spots, right? Like right now, other than CJ, Bub, and Trey, it's Malachi Branham, Sharif Cooper. I mean, these.
If you're talking strictly, except in the case of Trey Johnson, you're talking strictly about the one. Yes,
I would say the one and the two combined. Okay,
well, in that, yeah, I would say that Bilal Coulibaly is more a three than a two. But there are, you would acknowledge, correct, that there are moments when they call him a two.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay,
yeah.
So but in normal conversation, if we're not talking about semantics, we could consider Bilal a wing, right? A three, a two, a four. You know, they're actually going to have a three-wing lineup probably this year. If we consider Chris Middleton a wing, which he can be, and for all intents and purposes, he is. But you're broader, as Scott Skiles would say, your point is valid. Right? That's one of his phrases. If AJ can really play so well and grow so much, where he's going to be in the rotation for the season after this upcoming one, then I think that's a huge success for someone who's going to enter the 26-27 season at 21 years old.
Let us move to the next player, Bilal Coulibaly's draft mate, Tristan Vukcevic. What interests you most about the Wizards, I would say, backup third center?
I think it's fair to say that he's the third center right now because of the two-way restrictions. We've seen him enough to know that he has talent. He's he's very, very skilled. I wouldn't say extraordinarily. So he's very skilled as a 7-footer. Can shoot, can pass, really good offensive feel for the game. But can he defend? And does he have a feel for the game defensively? Those are the areas, along with his toughness and rebounding, that he needs to improve. So how much defensive progress does he make? Can he make enough defensive progress to where he's league average? I don't think that that's reasonable by the start of next season necessarily. I think he needs more time. But can he approach it? Can he approach league average on defense? Because if he approaches and hits league average on defense, including his rebounding, then you're starting to cook with gas, as they say. I mean, Tristan doesn't use the phrase "cook with gas," but you know what I'm saying. I'm almost anticipating your questions, and I'm almost giving my answer before you get there. But I think that for him, that's what I want to see if he can do.
Yeah, I mean, let's get there in a second. I want to talk about the offense real first, because you're right. He is very skilled, and he's a lot of fun. I was rewatching a game of his, and He does a lot. Pick and pop. He's really comfortable putting the ball on the floor. Sometimes too comfortable putting the ball on the floor. But he's willing to get inside. He's an okay finisher there. I thought he was a kind of surprisingly good cutter at times. He has a good feel for the space on the court. But yeah, you're right. The defense is that is the question with him, and it will be the question for a little bit. He is big. He is like legitimate. He has good size. He has good wingspan. He plays really upright, and he's talked about last year and this year how getting lower in his stance is one of those small things he can do to make himself better. There were occasional moments last season where you could see him starting to put things together defensively, but they were very few and far in between. Fouls a lot. There's a lot of room for improvement there.
True. And I'm just looking up his age again. All right, so he's 22 years old now.
Ancient.
Ancient. I think it's fair for us to remind ourselves and our listeners that back in the day, not too long ago, players would come out of college at 23 or 22. And all the things that I said about Bilal needing time to build a rhythm and AJ needing time to get his feet under him, that applies to Vukcevic also. Even on the defensive end. Mm-hmm. Reps matter on the defensive end as well, perhaps even more so, considering the speed of the game and the processing element of being a 5 in the NBA, being that sort of traffic cop that Draymond Green certainly is. So this is another player who, because of injuries last year, and his late arrival and lack of playing time overseas 2 seasons ago, hasn't gotten the reps, at least as many reps as I think he needs to really make progress. Although, and I recognize I'm all over the place, a lot of this is also want to. A lot of defensive rebounding for a 7-footer that should be relatively easy compared to like someone Justin Champagne's size, but you got to want to get the ball, mm-hmm. and you got to want to defend, and you got to really concentrate on defense to commit at the right times and to defend properly. And that's also part of this. I'm not just saying that this will all magically improve if he plays 70 games across all competitions at 20 minutes a game. That's an important part of it, but it's not the only part.
Absolutely. Echoing everything you said, the consistency for him is going to be a big step forward that he needs to see. And this is something I think he mentioned. One of the steps he's taken forward is he thinks he's gotten more mature with his game. And I would like to see how that translates. Do you think he starts the season as the backup center? Do you think he starts kind of more in the G League? Do you think that's still an open question?
No, I think Marvin Bagley starts the season as the backup center. Whether they deploy Alex at the 4 at times or deploy Tristan at the 4 sometimes is up to debate. I think what I'm kind of pausing at is, well, how do they juggle the 50 game limit for the 2-way? Are they expecting come late February to be down a roster spot and then summarily converting the contract, or negotiating a multi-year standard contract with him, in which, if they are, then the 50-game limit isn't so important. But for now, if I were to guess, I would think that he would enter the season as there may be nights where, to begin the season, he's inactive. That's because of the 50-game limit, and maybe Anthony Gill is the third-string center. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, 100%. He's someone who the range of outcomes for this upcoming season are pretty varied because some of it depends on the moves that happen around him. What is a successful season for Tristan Vukcevic in 2025-26?
It's making clear progress on the defensive end while retaining and accentuating his gifts offensively.
Absolutely. For me, I think you can be a 2-way player until after your 4th season, I'm pretty sure. And so he's eligible for one more after this. Does he get another 2-way? Does he get a full-time deal? Do they convert him at some point? Does he show enough this season on the defensive end where you feel comfortable walking into next season saying, okay, Alex Sarr is our starting center, here is our backup, and we're not going to need to sign another veteran? I don't know how much he needs to show to get there. I think he needs to show a decent amount, but I do think that would constitute a massive success for him.
Agreed.
All right, let's move to the Wizards' second first-round pick from the 2025 draft, Will Riley. Riley's obviously the player we've seen the least of in the NBA. We have a couple summer league games to go off of, and also his college film. But what interests you most about this player?
What intrigues me about Will Riley? Part of it is that he reminds me a lot of Keyshawn George, not necessarily in terms of how he plays, because we haven't seen him play enough yet, although there are certainly some clear similarities. What I'm more interested in is how, in Keyshawn George's case, he was undervalued by the rest of the league, wound up being drafted 25th, maybe it was 24th, 25th. Just judging by that, if you knew nothing else about Keyshawn George, the expectations for him as a rookie would have been low, and he far surpassed them. Is something similar in store for Will Riley? Maybe not to the degree that it was for Keyshawn George, but does he show the rest of the league that they undervalued him in the draft process? It's possible. He was basically, I think, a sixth man at Illinois. Sixth man of the year, maybe the freshman, sixth man of the year, if I recall correctly, in the Big Ten. And so that's something that it's similar type of player in terms of height and feel for the game on the offensive end. Well, maybe there are elements to his defensive game that we're not aware of yet, like we were not aware of the defensive elements to Keyshawn George's game. That's something that makes me very intrigued by Will Riley. Every young player on the Wizards has me very intrigued, and this is kind of a different type of reason.
Yeah, I think that he has a very different archetype, I think, than some of the players the Wizards have targeted before. He is a little big for his position, but he's not a super... I don't think he has a plus wingspan, and he's more of a shot creator mold than some of the more archetypes. I think the Wizards approach these things on a best player available. I don't think they were necessarily hunting for a different kind of archetype, but you look at Will Riley, and this is a real shot creator guy who can get a bucket. He's someone who can string dribble moves together really well. There was a bucket in Summer League where he's spinning and falling and he gets it in, and it looks really great when it happens. I am curious how much of that can translate to the NBA game, especially early on. I think it will be a little bit of a struggle in those areas, like it is for most rookies. That kind of gets me to the other thing, which is what concerns me most about this player. He's really, really light right now. He is someone who needs to put on a lot of weight as his career unfolds, and he's addressed that himself already. So I don't think we're breaking any news here by saying that.
I can put him on a weight gain diet, easy. just sit around and eat while you watch TV. He's only, as you know, he's only 19. He doesn't turn 20 until February. Actually, he has my dad's birthday, February 10th. I'm just looking here at the roster. So the weight, the strength, that can, again, time is on his side. I don't know about his metabolism. It's probably fast. It's probably very fast. But time is on his side in terms of adding weight. And I'm not expecting him to be a top-level defender. The book on him is that he's not a plus athlete. He's not a really interested defender. That's the conventional wisdom on him. That was also the exact same conventional wisdom on Keyshawn George. And lo and behold, at the end of last year, after Bilal Coulibaly suffered his season-ending hamstring injury, well, it was Keyshawn George guarding the opponent's top perimeter playmaker, scorer, ball handler. So it is possible that all the conventional wisdom, the so-called book, is wrong. It's happened before. It happened last year with Keyshawn George and the Wizards. And certainly with what we know about his feel for the game on the offensive end, I think that's that's at least a very good place to start.
Agreed. I'm curious how much minutes he gets throughout this season. It's a really crowded wing room. Bilal, Keyshawn, Cam Whitmore, Justin Champagnie, Chris Middleton, who's going to play a lot of the time. I'm struggling a little bit to see how much time Will Riley could conceivably get. And for a 19-year-old, that's important. That gets me to, similar to the A.J. Johnson conversation, do you think that there's any chance that he spends portions of this season in the G League, Will Riley?
I sure do. If, as you think, and as I think, that minutes are going to be tough to come by initially. And I was just as you were talking, I was just about ready to blurt in and hijack the podcast by saying, well, if there's ever been a team constructed where the G League is really the team's friend, well, it's the Wizards. It's the 25-26 Wizards, where they have 10 guys in year 3 or earlier on their standard roster. We're not even talking about Vukcevic, and we're not even talking about Jameer Watkins, for example. So the G League really is their friend, and for sometimes when these teams say, "Oh, the G League is such a great tool," well, they don't. Some of those teams don't really use it in the way that perhaps it can best be used. And I think in the Wizards' case, they sure as heck are going to utilize that as much as they possibly can, in addition to the 12 to 15 people who are on the regular G League roster who they're trying to develop. That is the perfect setup for them. Will Riley, A.J. Johnson, Tristan Vukcevic, these are people who will benefit from having that team not only in the same city, but in the same building. So, yes, and I just said a whole lot to say one thing, but the G League this year really can and should be the Wizards' ally.
They also, there's overlap in the coaching staffs. There's a lot of intentionality created into how they try and structure those organizations so that moving between the G League team and the NBA team is a somewhat seamless process. What does a successful season look like for Will Riley? Get
minutes wherever they are. Show you can defend on the NBA level. I think a large part of his early career is going to be about that. It's presumptuous of me in a way to imply that offense should be easy for him. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think that is offense is being at the bare minimum an average offensive player is well within his grasp. I don't think there's a real question there. I think the real question, again, is about his defense. And if he can put that question to rest, then for him, it's upward and upward.
Yeah, with his offense, he's got a lot of the skills. You can tell that this is a guy who, once again, grew up a lot playing with the ball in his hands. I'm curious what it looks like when the ball isn't in his hands this year, because he was a bit of a shaky shooter at Illinois. He looked great shooting it in Summer League, but obviously a really, really small sample. I'm curious to see what it looks like early on. But yeah, like you said, the defense is going to be the swing skill in a lot of ways, especially early in his career for him to get minutes, just because he's a lighter guy. He's going to need to work a lot on that end. It seems like he's gotten good reviews for playing hard, especially in the early days of training camp, but also in Summer League. I remember JJ Outlaw telling us, who's a Summer League coach, telling us that he was crashing the offensive glass a lot. Even if you didn't see it show up in the numbers, you saw him jumping back into the play and trying to get those extra positions. So I'm curious if he has a knack for that and what that looks like as the season goes on. All right. That wraps up our player previews. We're going to wrap up today by each of us are going to provide a thing that we're curious about for the Wizards preseason opener Sunday afternoon. Josh, what are you looking for?
I don't look for much in a preseason opener. Doesn't mean I'm not excited to be there. Doesn't mean that it's not interesting. I don't draw many conclusions other than maybe the lineup, maybe if everyone's healthy. Now, in their case, not everyone's going to be healthy. Really, all really that I would care about if I were a Wizards fan, get out healthy. Just get out healthy, for the love of God. And that, of course, goes for, in their case, preseason game 2 and 3. So I don't mean to simplify the question, but that's primarily what I'm looking at. I don't anticipate that there are many positional questions that we have, let alone questions that will be answered after one preseason game.
Agreed. For me, it's twofold. One on the court, one off the court. I am a little bit curious to see what the perimeter defense looks like. This is not going to be a end-all, be-all. We should not be drawing any kind of conclusions from it, but are they a little bit more active on the perimeter? Are they able to force a little bit more when it comes to turnovers? Curious for that. And I'm also curious what the newly renovated bowels of Capital One Arena look like. We get a new media room, which I'm very excited for. The locker rooms are all new, so we'll look forward to it.
Well, I am interested in that, but that's not. Yes. So you took the question in a very liberal way. Yeah. No. So that's interesting. I think, by the way, that they are going to practice at the arena on Saturday. So you and I will get our sense of that. My guess as to what some of the media space is going to look like, I think it's going to look a little bit like the Chase Center. Not Chase Hughes' house, but the Chase Center, the Warriors building, where there's – now we're really getting into the weeds, folks, but I think but we'll talk about it anyway. It's Varun's podcast, and he led us down this road. I think there's going to be like a little ante-room where the print writers, mainly the beat writers, will have seats, maybe like 8 to 10 total seats. That's kind of what I've heard, and so yes, I'm interested to see that.
I did get a photo of this from our Caps reporter. I think it's going to look pretty similar for both things, but I'll text that to you after this. Okay,
so please don't. Bailey sent you the photo. Is that right? All right, so please. I don't care who took the photo. Don't send it to me because I want to.
You want to be surprised.
I want to go in there and possibly be surprised.
Fair
I think
enough.
I know what it's going to look like. But, thank you for the offer, but I must decline.
Okay, fair enough. Any closing thoughts you'd like to share on anything we talked about?
I think the overall point is that with young players, there's really an element of fascination because you never know how a young player, particularly when they're this young, they weren't this young, in some cases 20 years ago, they were 30 years ago, they weren't this young coming into the league or in year 2 of the league or even in year 3 of the league. There's an element of fascination because you never know how people will develop or not develop, what elements of someone's game will blossom, for lack of a better word. So that's one of the things that's going to make these Wizards interesting. They have so many young guys, so many of whom are really going to play, that it's possible that we see growth just over the course of a single season. And it's possible that there have been some gains over the 170 to 175 day off season that you and I haven't seen yet and the fans haven't yet seen, in some cases even with the summer league players. So that won't be answered in game 1 of preseason, but by game 20 of the regular season, we'll know how the off season went. And then by game 60, we will know how the early portion of the season went. Something to look forward to.
Absolutely. Josh, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much to Josh for joining me. You can find him on social media at Joshua B. Robbins. You can find me at Varun Shankar and the show using the handles in the episode description. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, leave a comment. If you're on Apple, leave a 5-star review. We will be back next week with more player previews. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys next time.